Good drive now put together by the Jaguars, 10th play. First down at the 22. Quick throw. Ingram looking for blocks. Getting blocks. And his first touchdown of the year. Third down and about a yard and a half. Extra men on the rush. This one floated. Caught by Chase. And he is gone. Touchdown Cincinnati as he takes it into the end zone. He beat Tyson Campbell. And 76 yards later, the Bengals have their first lead of the night. Evan McPherson, who will try to end it from 48 yards away. He got it.
He got it indeed. Evan McPherson pipes it in overtime for the Bengals, a game that Cincinnati desperately needed. If they had any hopes of staying in the AFC playoff picture, they get it done on the road, knocking off the Jaguars 34-31, a thriller and one of the best primetime games of the year. Dan Hanzus here with Marc Sessler and Gregg Rosenthal. And Mark, this is why you can't judge a book by the cover, because we were all talking about, what a bummer this game was going to be. Jake Browning in for Joe Burrow. There should have been Lawrence v. Burrow in a showdown of two AFC elites. Well, we didn't get Burrow, but we got Jake Browning playing like Joe Burrow, and that allowed us to enjoy a classic. And I guess you have to also mention, because you can't get out of a big game this season with a terrible injury, Trevor Lawrence exits this game with what looked like a pretty nasty ankle injury, and as we tape this, we're waiting to find out more.
Yeah, I mean, there were a rash of moving parts to this one. It's like you're so right. I feel like we come out of these huge island games so often this season with a bittersweet feeling, because it's like watching what happened to Trevor Lawrence, and we'll wait and see. It was just like it changes everything that can happen to the Jaguars. But that's how I felt about the Bengals. Even as we were leaving the office today, we were saying, maybe we just we'll cover the game for 10 or 12 minutes, then we can dive into news and make the show about something else. We get a classic. And the one thing I remember reading a couple weeks ago about Browning, and I mentioned it on a Thursday show before he appeared for the first time, that they were behind the scenes saying they just felt that he had this like calm and confidence, and that they felt that they could run their same offense with him. And that just sounds like malarkey until you really see it. But what we got tonight, I thought, was just one of the most exciting performances from a backup you could ever imagine. I mean, he's 32 for 37. He completely works with Jamar Chase. The offense was totally functional. I thought he threw with total confidence. And I don't know what will happen with any of these teams in the AFC. You've got 4 AFC teams right now in the playoff picture at the moment, number seeds 1 through 7, that have major quarterback injuries. And the Bengals are kind of hovering around. And if you get this version of a backup quarterback behind Joe Burrow, I don't know what will happen to them. They have plenty of other talent. It's like this was a kind of a revelation. And I think it kind of just stunned me in real time, Greg, just to watch it unfold.
Yeah, it was just an incredible game. The Lawrence injury changes what we think about Jacksonville. We'll find out more about how long it is, because they're 8-4. They're in good position. They're 1 game ahead of the Texans, although we'll get to their defense. If McManus could have kicked a go-ahead field goal with 5 minutes to go, and then their defense holds on to it there, this would have been just such a big win to bank before possibly losing Lawrence. But we don't know if it's just going to be a couple games or if it's the rest of the season or anything, or maybe it won't be anything. Jake Browning, though, changes how we look at this race too, and how you look at when you're going to play the Bengals. And the key play, and we heard on the highlight, was that long throw to Chase, just because I think of what it showed had already been happening in that game. I mean, he started out 14 for 15 for like 150. But on that play, they send the blitz. And Mike Caldwell, the Jaguars defensive coordinator, loves to send pressure because he doesn't really get natural pressure. They have Josh Allen, and they don't really have anyone else. They don't have Trayvon Walker. They don't have any push up front. And you figure against Jake Browning, you're going to be able to heat him up. And every time they sent the blitz early, he always knew right where to throw it. Occasionally it was tipped. It didn't work. Sometimes they got the Bengals guy down before first down, but not usually. But on that Chase touchdown, He throws a beautiful ball to Chase against their best Jaguars cornerback, Tyson Campbell. It goes for a long touchdown. Campbell struggled all night. They lose their slot corner, Trey Herndon, right away, who's played really well for them. Suddenly they're struggling with injuries. And it's Jake Browning who has the wherewithal to be picking on mismatches in the Jaguars secondary. You're right, Dan. Like, if Burrow had this exact same performance, we would just be talking about what a classic Burrow game. And instead it was a classic Jake Browning game, right down to the figure 8 scramble in overtime to set up the game winner.
I mean, in crunch time, on the road, in a game with your season on the line, this guy is calmly going through his progressions and connecting with receivers to lead that offense. And, he's Zach Taylor. I know we will butt heads on him occasionally, but you don't get a backup that plays at this level without having a sound operation. We're going to get to the Jets a little later. That's like the other end of the spectrum. I think this shows you that Taylor really has a strong handle on his offense, and they identified a backup quarterback that even though we didn't see him, they saw him. And you heard a lot of great things about Browning, and this is all going to come out beyond, remember, before we saw him play, oh, he was awesome in high school, because there was really nothing to go off with him yet. And now we see how he played in this game. We heard that he was spending his day offs in the defensive backs meetings, studying, waiting for his opportunity. And now he has a chance to become a really interesting story in the AFC. Here's some news from Tom Pelissero, the Pellraiser himself. Jags quarterback Trevor Lawrence's initial diagnosis is a sprained ankle with an MRI to follow Tuesday. Okay, so the good news there is that he didn't come out of the x-ray room and they said, oh, it was a broken ankle, which certainly seemed like it was within the range of outcomes. But we're not out of the woods yet because you don't know if he has ligament damage. You look at what just happened with Pickett in Pittsburgh. He needed surgery. So we'll find out how serious this ankle issue is, but at least the ankle didn't snap and we have an issue like that. So Jaguars fans, at least you at this point maybe avoided a worst case scenario.
We'll find out more on that. I really agree with you about Zach Taylor, who's, I used to kill him all the time. Gregg is not a huge fan. And I think part of what was happening with Zach Taylor during even the Joe Burrow successful string of time was that, like, the offensive line that were having issues, you didn't see them adjust. And I thought they did a lot of 6-man protection tonight to help Browning. The other thing was their run defense had been a complete disaster in recent days, and they couldn't run the ball. And both of those things changed tonight. So I don't know if this is a situation where it's like the Bengals have turned a corner, or it happened against, in a special situation tonight, but they played a really good defense. And to see what they did, like, not as a holistic offense, I thought was a big turning point. And, the same way that Matt LaFleur is getting a lot of credit for the past couple of weeks with a young quarterback, like this has some fingerprints or some evidence that Zach Taylor does have some ability to grow a quarterback. I mean, just to see where he was from a week ago to now, there aren't that many things happening like this with quarterbacks where the development is that quick.
Zach Taylor is making me eat some humble pie tonight. This is, one of the most impressive nights I think of his career because of what you guys said, because it shows all the work and the judgment they've been doing for 3 years. We covered the game closely. I have to admit, I did not understand, throughout the season that Jake Browning graduated from Washington, where he racked up all those numbers, and he had 91 touchdowns in high school going up against Maurice Jones-Drew's school, apparently in one season, including one game against Maurice Jones-Drew's school, he was saying. That was back in like 2011. He graduated from college in 2018. He's been bouncing around the NFL, first as an undrafted free agent for the Vikings for 3 years and not sticking on roster in the practice squad and the offseason, all that stuff. And then with the Bengals organization for 3 years. So it actually reminded me a little bit of Sunday night and Jordan Love, someone that's been in an organization and understands the offense. And he obviously doesn't have the talent that a Jordan Love does or Joe Burrow does, but he does have a style that will work. And I think that style is a little more aggro, is a little more throw the ball down the field. And I was really impressed by Zach Taylor going for it on 4th down to start the game. Remember, it didn't work. He's at midfield and you go for it with Jake Brown. I was like, that's very unlike Zach Taylor. He doesn't do that with Joe Burrow. At the end of the game, he's going for the win when they only have 35 seconds. Nick Sirianni wasn't doing that for Jalen Hurts. And I thought so many times, fourth down at the end of the game when Jamar Chase drops it. And again, Jake Browning is dropping back and he calmly gets it to Chase. And you're right, Mark, like everyone lifted up Browning too. The running game was fantastic. Chase, I think, made a number of great catches on balls that weren't like perfect. It was awesome, but it does start with Browning and it starts with Zach Taylor in the game plan that they put together for him.
32 of 37 Browning was for 354 yards, averaged over 9.5 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown passing, 1 touchdown rushing, no turnovers, passer rating 115.5. Brilliant. It's really a fun scene. It reminded me of the Mike White game, ironically, against the Bengals, where a similar situation where there's a team that had no hope, and then all of a sudden this guy that had no track record is lighting it up, and you could tell. And I think Zach Taylor spoke about it after the game tonight. Once you see this unknown start to ball out, the whole confidence of the team rises up, and they just kept on going punch for punch with the Jags, even when. It was a great night for Taylor overall, but, he started to get a little cute in spots, including that devastating Tyler Boyd pass attempt that looked like a potential turning point where the Jaguars would take control of the game, and yet they couldn't because Cincinnati kept fighting back. They're kind of a really... I would think you guys agree because I think we're all on the same page. We were kind of seeing Cincinnati as an afterthought in this AFC playoff race, the way things were trending. But now it's going to be really interesting to see like where they stack up. Starting with next week, they get the Colts, another team that was kind of left for dead, and then all of a sudden they're waving their hands like, no, we have a chance to get to the dance. A nice little shot of adrenaline for the AFC.
Much needed. By the way, I just got a text from Nick Wessling. Bad night for me, you, and all the Zach Taylor haters. But it's good to be proven wrong on a night like this because of what you said. It adds so much value, I think, to the Bengals, who are in some big games against good teams, a lot of matchups against playoff-type teams. It's going to make it more interesting. I think you saw what I've been saying about the defense, especially the pass defense, is just it's not it. And
right.
That was the thing that was exciting about this game was Trevor Lawrence was playing really well too. It almost felt like sometimes he was responding to Browning. Every time Browning and the Bengals went down the field, it's like Lawrence suddenly had a rifle shot to answer him. And it was just back and forth, touchdown after touchdown. But you're right, there was that sequence where Trevor Lawrence threw his worst pass of the night, should have been picked off in the end zone, but Dax Hill kind of just mismanages it, essentially drops it. It goes through his hand, and it turns out to be a Parker Washington touchdown for the Jaguars. That's a 7-point swing, and almost like 2 plays later is that interception, and you're thinking, okay, finally the Bengals are going to, just go run away with this game. But, I mean, the Jaguars are going to run away with this game. But their defense wasn't good enough, Mark, and it does concern me because I'm always thinking, like, a good defense is, like, always a few weeks away from just being like, oh, yeah, they're just average again. And they did get their doors blown off by San Francisco. I know that was San Francisco. That happens to everyone. But they kind of got their doors blown off tonight, in every facet. Chase Brown, everything was going well for Cincinnati.
Yeah, I mean, I think in another world, because even, CJ Beathard came in and he almost stole this game away. And there's this play that stands out in my mind where it's this incredible deep shot and Calvin Ridley makes an incredible catch down inside the 5, and then that's yanked away by a holding call, because if that had stood, we're talking about a completely different end of this situation. And I think you would have been right to steal this game if you were Jacksonville, would have been immense. We'll see what happens with Lawrence, but I like a game like this because it kind of changes where we are with this AFC playoff race, which is a little suspect to me if you look at the bottom couple of teams in here.
All right, here's Doug Peterson when asked about the status of his star quarterback.
I don't have any information yet on Trevor. We're still evaluating him, so he'll have more, tests and things done here tonight and tomorrow. So I'll probably have a better update for you tomorrow on that. But, I mean, yeah, we had position players go down, but look, it's part of the game. It happens, and it's unfortunate, but, next guy up has to be ready to go and play. And I thought the guys that filled in, were just that. They were ready to go.
Listen, Carson, Doug Doug Peterson's been through the wars. Once upon a time, Carson Wentz blew out his ACL for an Eagles team, blowing through the regular season, and everyone thought the season was over, and then they won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. So he's hoping they could just weather the storm here, but it was, a really bad night to lose at home. And I know, Browning, now we look at him differently, but going into this game, you got a Bengals team limping without Joe Burrow coming into your house in prime time, and to lose that game, and to lose Trevor Lawrence, and to lose Christian Kirk, who went out with a groin injury, and really to lose, to me, like your real chance to somehow, if they would have won out, which was unlikely, they are the number 1 seed, and they're still in the mix for that. But I think you're going to remember this is the night they let that slip away as well. So they have a lot to recover from, obviously.
They play the Browns next week and the Ravens the week after that. So that Ravens game especially was going to be really important for them, not only to get the 1 seed, but to try to cement the division, because they don't necessarily have the tiebreaker over Houston. That's to be determined. And so they split the season series. They're 1 up. Cleveland gets a little bit of a break here, assuming they don't see Lawrence next week. CJ Beathard's a little different as a backup, just because we've seen him play in the NFL before. We've seen him play for the Jaguars before, not extensively because Lawrence has been durable. But Beathard was out there looking like he thought he was Michael Vick, and he's not the worst backup in the league, but he probably has a lower, I think it's fair to say he's established, he just has a lower ceiling of like what his potential outcomes are, and their defense and their run game can't play like this around CJ Beathard. That Browns game is going to be a toss-up at best, and they'll be heavy underdogs if they don't have Lawrence back for the Ravens. And then the schedule eases up down the stretch if they can get Lawrence back for the playoffs.
I think the thing that you mentioned about the Browns getting a break because of potentially with the Trevor Lawrence, I feel like half the AFC and half the NFL are getting breaks week to week.
Right, and everyone that plays the Browns obviously is getting huge breaks. So that's a good point.
There are, I think, next week 5 tilts that include like a backup versus a backup. So it's like we're in that part of the chaotic
I think we're getting to the point where it's mathematically impossible to just have 2 games with starting quarterbacks that were there in week 1, which is a bummer. And it is, we're going to stay positive tonight because it was a great game and fun to watch. But this is a plot line of this season that's going to kind of mar it when you look back at it. This is the year. I mean, it started obviously with the Rodgers injury and how dramatic that was on Monday night. And it just feels like every week there's something new. I mean, look at the Bengals a couple weeks ago. We're watching that game and they have that dramatic shot of him on the sideline trying to throw and then kind of dropping down to his knee. Too much of that. Too much. The game is just not the same without good quarterbacks. So even more reason to say, Jake Browning, thank you. We needed that. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll get to the news. All right, welcome back to Around the NFL. Monday Night Football, out of the way. Week 13, out of the way. How about that? Week 14, right around the corner. Let's get caught up on the news, starting with Shaq Leonard. It's finally done. He has made his decision, and it will be the Philadelphia Eagles who he suits up for. Leonard, the former All-Pro, released in a surprise move by the Colts last week. He will join a Philly team, Greg, that certainly can use a lift in the middle of their defense. They've been getting carved up. We just saw it on with San Francisco. I guess my one take from this, Greg, is he's a big name brand. But as Wes was known to say, that the game no longer matches the name. So unless he, a change in scenery allows him to recapture a spark, I'm not sure how much this move makes the Eagles better, but I guess it's worth a roll of the dice.
Right. So he was not playing a ton on passing downs for the Colts, but he was playing a lot. He was playing 30, 40 snaps a game. It wasn't like he was benched. I can't say he was making a ton of splash plays or that he stood out good or bad. To me, PFF had him graded fairly well, just like as a solid starting linebacker. And if he's that, and they have a good way of really bringing out the best in veterans, I think he'll help them. But the way I've heard Eagles fans talk about it, it's like they think they're getting 3-time All-Pro Shaq Leonard and that he's going to save them at that position. And that seems unrealistic to me, and it also seems to be missing the point, which is that they have a lot of issues in that secondary. It's not just the linebackers like Darius Slade, James Bradbury. Everyone's giving up way too much and is not the same as they were a year ago, and their front hasn't been as special as they need it to be. And so, like, what's Shaq Leonard really going to do? Like, he should be a little bit of an upgrade from Nick Murrow, but I think in the local markets in Philly and Dallas, this was treated like it was like a huge sweepstakes, and it probably isn't going to change that much.
I think it's a little bit baked into the fact that there's, photos being released all over the place of Big Dom, taking a tour around with Shaq Leonard and being part of the process to like recruit him there. That was like,
What, Dom just showed? Oh, was this
Big Dom was like,
Sunday?
as a security guy, like was the guy that kind of brought Shaq down. But I would say this, why not take a shot? And like, it really only matters how you perform if you're the Eagles against like the Cowboys and the Niners when we really get there. And like Nakobe Dean banged up, Zach Cunningham banged up. Like we just saw they give up, 456 yards. So if it clicks, it clicks. And it's kind of like the Eagles are like the NFC version for me of like the Ravens, where like they go get this player that someone else wanted to trade or move on from, and it works. So it's like, why not try? Why not try? It's hard to get a good player at this time of year.
Right. They've done it. And thing that's really interesting, and I'll leave it at that, is that there were no financial repercussions here. It's a very rare chance where a player is actually just choosing which team do I want to go to for whatever reason, like to win, which team gives me a better chance to win, to play, whatever, because the Colts are paying his contract either way. It's all guaranteed. They're the ones paying. And it's pretty interesting. He's choosing between the Eagles and the Cowboys. I figured he'd choose the Cowboys just because that seems like a more fun place to go live or whatever. And he picks the Eagles, and they play the Cowboys this week. That's kind of juicy.
Spicy. I'm trying to find the article, but the whole Big Dom story really took a almost erotic turn when a former, I believe, offensive lineman for the Eagles, a member of the Super Bowl team, and I apologize for not having his name off the top of my head, was quoted as saying that he would give his life for Big Dom. It's like, all right, what's going on there? His life.
It's a blood oath. Once you're in with Big Dom, like, you're in for life. You're either in or you're out.
Or you're really in. All right, let's talk about the biggest joke in the NFL, my favorite team, the New York Jets. This report from The Athletic was one of the big stories in the NFL on Monday. It came from Zach Rosenblatt and Diana Rossini, and then Jeff Howe chipping in as well with The Athletic, that the Jets are prepared to make another switch at quarterback after, Rodgers blows his Achilles. Zach Wilson takes back over the starter. He's bad. They bench him. They bring in Tim Boyle. He sucks. They bench him. They bring in Trevor Siemian. He sucks. And now the idea is, what about going back to Wilson? And then the report that Wilson was reluctant to take back the job, and the team wants to turn back to Wilson, but he is hesitant to step back into the role. Multiple team sources said Monday. Here's another, a graph from that report. Aaron Rodgers had reached out to Wilson in an effort to advise him to resume the starter role, but at the time, Wilson remained apprehensive due to perceived injury risk, per team sources. Okay, and then Robert Saleh, and there is not a more emasculated coach in the NFL in recent memory than Saleh. Every week, he is answering questions and being asked to explain things that he has no control over. And now it's come to the point where even the bust quarterback, he doesn't even control him and the ability to make him play quarterback for his team, or so it seems. That's not the way Saleh's painting it in his press conference.
Well, let's be clear. If he was reluctant to play guys, he wouldn't be here. All right. I actually coincidentally just got done speaking with him. He came in about a half hour ago, and we had a really good conversation. The young man wants the ball. He wants to start. He believes he's the best quarterback in the room and best quarterback for this team, and the guy who gives us the best chance to win. And I'll tell you guys the same thing I told him. I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that he wants to play. I'm just not there yet.
It's just not there yet. So, and it's just, that is even absurd. Like, so he's trying to couch that as, I haven't even made a decision yet, but if I do make a decision, Zach has now told me he wants to play. Boys, what this sounds like to me, and tell me if you think it's something else, is the Jets, who have been completely misguided about their quarterback room since Rodgers went down. They finally get sick of Wilson's struggles. They bench him for the second or third time since he was the number 2 overall pick. And they say to him a couple weeks ago, hey, we're really sorry. This is not going to work out. We're going to go in a different direction. Not only are we going to demote you, we're going to essentially deactivate you. And then after the season's over, we'll find a way to kind of part ways and best of luck to you. And because the Jets are such a poorly run organization, they underestimate how bad these other quarterbacks in their building are. And so when those guys are making them completely non-competitive, they go back to Zach and say, Zach, we need you again. And Zach Wilson saying, bruh, like, you are not bringing me back next year. I am sick of being your whipping boy. I'm not safe playing in front of that offensive line. And I'm trying to restart my career next year, and I know you don't like me. So why should I play for you? I've thought about this a lot, boys. I think Zach Wilson is an anti-hero. I think Zach Wilson is telling the Jets, you are incompetent, so you could take this quote-unquote job and shove it. And as much as, and I know my dad is totally on the other side of this and thinks it's a disgrace that he would ever do that, but I have to say, I understand where Wilson is coming from, if indeed that is what the backstory is here.
I think that's a great positing of the situation. Now, I don't know if he had any promises that like you're done for the season or anything like that. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm somewhere in the middle that I understand that viewpoint of him kind of sticking it to them. And I just think it's career suicide to really not want to play. You're not playing for the organization. You're playing for your teammates. That's what they always say. And ultimately, in a situation like this, you're playing for your career, like to put something on tape, to try to continue, to get it going, to get a positive grade, to show something. And you're playing for your teammates. You feel like you owe it to them. And when I saw these reports, I just thought, I never heard of something like this. This is some ridiculousness. And I was just thinking, and we can get into it. I want you to go, Mark, but like, I just was like, what is the motivation of this even getting out there? Is someone trying to paint him poorly? Diana reported that it was coming from many parts of the organization, that they had heard this, like players, coaches, staff had all heard this. And then after she reports it, Jeff Howe has this report, which just took my breath away. Quote, if Zach Wilson were asked directly by the Jets to start, he would agree to that. A source familiar with Wilson's thinking that. What are we doing here? I honestly don't even have a take. My take is what is happening? That is the wildest thing I've ever heard as a report. I don't even know what that is. It's insane.
Yeah, I've been reduced to the same place where, like, when we say they want him to start or they told him X, Y, or Z, it's hard. And this is not, this is true of the Jets too many seasons, and it's true of bad teams. Like, who is even they at this point? Because the coach seems to be almost outside the bubble of decision-making and explaining things that he doesn't have full accountability for on some level. And that creates a sense of confusion. If you are Zach Wilson, it's been an absolute disastrous experience to go out on the field. Because I think part of it is like he doesn't really have the support of his teammates. I mean, there's evidence that a lot of his offensive teammates feel like if you're Garrett Wilson, like my career is falling apart because of this quarterback situation in New York. The team's falling apart. The defense is on fire about the whole thing. And so it's like not an enjoyable thing to be Zach Wilson.
You got to play though, or else you kind of got to get out of the
I would say
building,
one thing, his resume, like on tape, is a mess. But I think because you have a first round pedigree, another team would say we can fix what the Jets couldn't fix, because that makes some sense. But if you're saying basically my desire to go out and be a teammate and play potentially doesn't exist, then it's like, cool, we don't need your ability isn't there. It's not like you're a special talent. You're not Jeff George and you're difficult. You're just Zach Wilson. You're not good and you don't really want to play. It's like you are sabotaging, and it seems almost immature if that's really what he's saying. That said, I'm not sure I even believe any of that. I don't even know where it's coming from or why, and why anyone would be trying to bury him.
The first report is and it was not really dismissed by Saleh exactly. I mean, he spoke to him, but he didn't exactly dismiss the initial report. It's too widely spread and too many different things happening for me to doubt that part is actually But that is true that he was just saying that people are saying that. But like for them not to understand that getting out was totally burying him, or unless it was someone that was intentionally trying to bury him. But it doesn't make sense for anyone to try to intentionally bury him because it's just all bad. It made me think, Dan, and maybe this was overreacting. This was the first time I thought, oh, Salah's got to go because this is just embarrassing. And you can say this is not Salah's fault for whatever reason, but it's just like it's all embarrassing. And I've asked around a little bit, and I think there's pushback. I think the conventional wisdom is that Salah stays, but I have my doubts, especially if it keeps going like this.
And if he stays, it's because it's a dysfunctional organization that doesn't see that this is too far gone, that he is not the right leader for this team, that Aaron Rodgers is the one now running the ship. I mean, it is everything is played out in an only the Jets fashion. In the worst case scenario, it's embarrassing as a Jets fan. I feel like I really am kind of on the ropes right now where I know I can't disconnect from the Jets and not be a Jets fan, but I'm getting to the point where like apathy is going to start creeping in, I feel like, because I'm just so disgusted talking about them year after year after year as being the joke of the league. And that's why the comment I said about Wilson being kind of an anti-hero, there's something cathartic about Wilson, and whether this was his intention or not. Finally, someone is really holding the team accountable and saying, you're a joke. Like ownership, general manager, head coach, offensive coordinator, you guys are a joke. If you think that I'm going to now come try to bail you out after you humiliated me and put me on the bench and deactivated me and told me that I was worse than Tim Boyle, who threw 1 touchdown and 13 interceptions for UConn, and Trevor Siemian, these are guys that shouldn't even be in the league. You're a joke, and everyone's laughing at the Jets, and I'm saying it now every show they come up. It's what the Joker said to De Niro. You get what you deserve, and that's what's happened to the Jets. They botched this from week 1 on, and now they're suffering the consequences, and no one feels bad for them because they never saw it coming, because they were so filled with confidence and smelling their own you-know-what that they never realized they were this vulnerable, even though everyone else could see it. So how can I, as a Jets fan, want that head coach back or that general manager back, or hell, even the quarterback who's done nothing? Nothing. Aaron Rodgers has done nothing for my team other than end up indirectly, you could say, cause more embarrassment and more pain and more misery. I'm just sick of it. I'm sick of it. It's one day they're going to do it. They're going to push me too far. It's getting close again.
You know, you could have.
Danny's not happy.
You don't have to have an unconscious or what is it? Conscious uncoupling. But you could like take a break, just be like, I'll see you in 6 weeks. Just like, you disconnect as much as you can. Come back.
But what do I do for a living, Greg?
No, well, that's a great
yeah. There's no
point,
getting away
Mark.
from them.
All right, let's just move on before my head explodes. The Steelers will be without Kenny Pickett for a while, but hopefully they'll get him back. He had ankle surgery, the Steelers quarterback, on Monday. He was on the injury report, by the way, because of an ankle injury last week. So he aggravated it against Arizona. There's no long-term timetable for how long he's going to be out, according to Mike Tomlin. They ruled him out, obviously, Thursday's game against the Patriots. And get ready, everybody. Mark, you and I are going to have fun with that one. Mitch Trubisky will start on Thursday. It's a high ankle sprain.
I mean, I feel like at the point where there are maybe some larger concerns about Pickett's durability, because it's been a sort of an array of up and down health issues, concussions, this, that, and Trubisky I don't really see as vastly different than Kenny Pickett. Greg, I think you're higher on Trubisky than I am. It's another AFC playoff
We've been
team.
talking about this for 20 years.
Well,
the Trubisky,
really just the last 2 years.
He feels like he's been in the league for over 100 years.
This year, I've always been
does.
very down, but I kind of liked him for a few moments in Pittsburgh last year. I've liked him less in Pittsburgh this year, the few times he's been.
I just think their floor is I like, so that, that offensive explosion where they scored 16 points and put up 400 plus yards, quintessential mirage. I mean, I just think this team is I said they were going to win 12 games, but they're lucky to have as many wins as they do right now. And we'll see what happens with Pickett. Thursday night, Dan, I mean, I might need you to like drop a bomb on my apartment. I mean, I'm not sure I can do it. I'm going to try.
Vegas has the over-under at, I believe, 30.5 now, which is the lowest over and under in the NFL in years.
Yeah, I think it's since 2005, and it's going down. I saw that 95%. I think it was our researcher, Kate Magzurek, I believe, said 95% of that money is going on the under. So it might keep sinking and sinking until it goes through the floor.
We should, you know what we're going to do? Listeners, I know you're going to think to yourself, if there's one episode to skip of Around the NFL, it's going to be the Thursday night football episode. Mark and I are going to cook up a secondary segment so explosive that it'll be the one everyone's talking about. People will be talking about our seg more than they'll be talking about that game.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think you're doing us a service as well. Because I just sat through 6-0 Patriots Chargers, a day ago. So it's like, how many, swings of the baseball
bat to the head compared to what we
be?
see on Thursday.
I've seen some reporting that it was the tightrope procedure. By the way, I think Trubisky adds the floor. I might go over here. Just Trubisky's going to throw some pick sixes. He is the Jameis Winston to Kenny Pickett's Derek Carr, where it's probably in the end not going to be any more effective, but it'll just be more chaotic and more points. I saw it reported somewhere that it's the tightrope procedure on Kenny Pickett. They did not put him on IR, and that's a high ankle sprain, and that's maybe 2 to 3 weeks you're out, which is just interesting to think about in context of Trevor Lawrence. We don't know what's going to happen, but Cameron Wolfe, just a little update as we're going, our reporter at NFL Network, is in the locker room there and said he was talking to teammates, Trevor Lawrence was, and they seemed like a little happy after. I mean, he's just reading the tea leaves here. He was on crutches and ended up walking out with a walking boot, putting a little bit of pressure on it, but not much really as he left. But they said that the teammates weren't in terrible spirits, and then he was taken out of the locker room on a cart. So they do have a cart, Dan.
Oh, finally.
In Jacksonville.
Jesus.
They found the cart. I mean, that
what
was so painful.
What are we doing? It's one thing where you're limping off the field and disappearing. When they cut, ESPN cuts to inside the bowels of that stadium, and he's moving about 6 inches every 30 seconds. It's like, guys, Shad, do we have something to take the franchise somewhere?
And also, so he's 6'6". He's obviously like a massively framed quarterback. Like, even the guys, under each one of his shoulders were big dudes too. But it's like they were not big enough to actually do the job, and they're just like tugging his body down this hallway. It's like technology.
What would work?
How many golf carts are in Jacksonville?
Like a 2,000-pound golf cart with 8 wheels and a flat back. That would be perfect for a 6'5", 230 built out of stone quarterback dealing with a nasty lower leg injury.
You know what we kind of lost in the shuffle there, and ESPN did too, was that Walker Little, who you really feel for, he stepped on Lawrence. And this is why I've seen some people being like, quarterbacks got to learn how to protect themselves. It's like his left tackle stepped on him during the drop back. Well, what do you want? I mean, it was just a fluky play. It's going to happen. And then he fell over it weirdly. Walker Little hurt himself on that play. Walker Little is their starting left tackle because they just lost their starting left tackle, Cam Robinson, for the season. So that was like a completely catastrophic play on a night. They also lost Kirk and Trey Herndon and Foley Fatukasi. So it was just like a crazy, terrible night for the Jaguars.
All right. In other news, you know what's going on in New Orleans right now. Everyone's an expert. Everybody knows how to fix the Saints and what's wrong with the Saints and everything. Everybody thinks it's amazing that there's all this talk going on and all this mocking of people. And isn't it cool that Michael Thomas is sending tweets during the game? I don't know why I'm being so nasty right now.
Let the fans be mad like you're mad. They're just mad.
No, but it's Michael Thomas. It's not the fans. I understand their frustration. Michael Thomas is the one who's tweeting, who was once a tremendous player, and now it's kind of just a guy, and he's once again injured. He's sending cryptic tweets during the game. Y'all said I was throwing shade. Not at all my eyes just work. Check yours. Okay, all that kind of stuff, and obviously taking shots at Carr after a turnover and the team in general and the coaching staff. Dennis Allen was forced to address this on the same day he explained that Derek Carr was going to be missing some time.
Yeah, we'll keep that in house, but I guess I was made aware of that last night. So
He deleted or took down his Twitter account. Can someone tell him that he had to take the tweets down? Or
I'm not aware of that.
Derek Carr is in the concussion protocol once again, but he's got all sorts of other injuries coming out of that game. So it feels like we're going to get a Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill jam this week.
Yeah, Thomas liked a post that, and this was last week actually, people were noticing that, liked a post that joked that Carr gave Thomas a hospital pass to openly critique him and stir up drama, and he had been like liking some anti-Carrish tweets.
This is what I'm talking about.
And then he was watching the game, and he was saying, I'm just using my eyes. He was just noticing, like on the interception, for instance, that there were wide open receivers on the other side of the field. So he's like openly being
and I guess he wants to get out of town. Probably,
I think he'll be gone, and I think they might both be gone.
But there's nothing like, I don't know, maybe there are people that disagree. I don't think there's anything cool or edgy or whatever about this. It's just I think you're being a bad teammate and you're using social media to kind of cause more issues. I think he's kind of a joke, personally. 30 years old, grow up.
He's been a distraction. He's been absent. He's not been the player he was. And it's like, how many examples of total chaos do we need inside the Saints organization? Like when you talk about Michael Thomas being away from the team, I think your average Saints fan wants Dennis Allen away from the team. And I kind of feel like no matter what happens to them on this journey this season, which has been unpleasant to the eyes, like it's going to be a massive offseason of change. And if it's not, what are they doing?
I've landed on it, Greg. I think now I understand why I started this conversation the way I did. I've talked about it a lot with Derek Carr, that he has been bad this year and he's not worth the money and it was a bad signing and he's been a problem. But I've seen a lot of, and what you've talked about it a lot, like Saints fans are very angry and frustrated, and these Michael Thomas stories have been popping up the last couple of weeks, and it's almost like he's being celebrated on some level for calling out this situation. And it's like that's part of the problem too. Like I feel like the Saints have just a lot of issues internally, and so maybe that is not something to celebrate. But I understand, I truly understand where Saints fans are coming from, that this has been a very rough season, and they have not lived up to expectations.
Right. Michael Thomas is kind of speaking for them. The most interesting one that he liked last week, I'm trying to find it, was about it was from like a motivational speaker that was like, weak leaders avoid difficult conversations, and the longer you delay, the harder the conversation gets, blah 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 blah. And people basically took that, and I think that's been a criticism of Dennis Allen, that he doesn't know how to manage people. There's been a lot of stories going like that. He's almost afraid to confront his own players, and I think he's lost that locker room. So for separating the quarterback from this, it feels like a team that is just adrift right now.
But Greg, it started with like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Like I think it had Sean Payton been there, you wouldn't have lost that player.
Right. Yeah, that was the very beginning of it. Yeah.
I would say one thing to Michael Thomas. Like, I don't know if you're diving into difficult conversations when you're liking other people's posts and subtweeting your own quarterback. That's not
Fair.
Having a one-on-one conversation.
Injury news. Derrick Henry is not in the concussion protocol and is on track to play in Week 14's matchup against the Dolphins. He had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards in yesterday's brutal loss to the Colts before.
Doubleheader next Monday night, guys. We got little Titans-Dolphins is one of them.
Nice. By the way, the Titans fired their special teams coach after miscues, including that block punt that swung that game. Jeffrey Simmons of the Titans will miss a couple of weeks with a knee injury as well, according to Mike Vrabel. So that is a big loss for the Titans. And anything to add there, boys?
No, other than that block punt, unfortunately, ended Ryan Stonehouse's season. Ryan Stonehouse, their punter, I would have guessed was a shoo-in maybe for All-Pro first team. Might still make it. But punters, the kickers get a lot of love on this show. Stonehouse was on a run that rivals any punter that any punters had probably in the last handful of years. So that is a shame.
What a devastating play.
I know.
So you lose one of your top players, your punter. You lose 7 points on the board and swings a game that you absolutely needed, and then it gets people fired as well. There are very few plays this season that have been that devastating for one team.
Almost impressive.
Yes, it's almost impressive, but really tragic in a way. Circling back to what we were honking about last night, with less than a minute to go in Sunday Night Football, Patrick Mahomes fired a deep ball to Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He was absolutely tackled almost by Carrington Valentine. They do not throw the flag. Instead of 1st and goal from about the 5-yard line, the Chiefs are left to scramble, and they never do get close after that. Final score 27-19. You heard the rules guy. Who's the rules guy for NBC again?
Macaulay.
He was very frank and said this is not good. There should have been a penalty. Guess what? That night, they trot out Brad Allen, the referee, and he explains after the game that, you know what? It wasn't. We didn't get this one wrong. Here's the quote. As you may know, on every play where there may or may not be pass interference, either offensive or defensive, the covering official has to rule whether contact materially restricts the receiver. And in this case, the covering officials were in good position and ruled that there was no material restriction that rose to the level of defensive pass interference. The ball appeared to be catchable for MVS. Allen did not dispute that. I am not aware that catchability was involved. The covering official simply did not feel that there was the level of contact that rose to a material restriction for defensive pass interference. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. That's brutal. Like, it does either way. It does nothing for the Chiefs, Mark, but it's like, at least say you got the call wrong so we could all just move forward as a society.
Yeah, that would be more pleasant. I guess my thing is, you can go read these NFL rule books. When you go read some of these paragraphs, it's like, I'm sorry, what's happening? But like our eyes, the broadcaster's eyes, our eyes, Terry McCauley's eyes, everyone is looking at this play and saying, this doesn't check out. So whatever the written rule is, like, maybe we need to examine that. I guess you can say whatever you want, but there's never accountability for these officiating crews when they blow something.
He sounded like a politician. If you listen closely, or you read it closely, they never said that the call was right. All he did was just explain in great detail that the guy was in position. Here's the rule, and he thought he was making the right call. It was one of those politician non-denial denials where it just said a lot of words, and he's like, well, this is what he ruled. He looked at it, he was in good position, and this is what he ruled because this is what he thought. But he missed the point of yes, that's all true. We know he thought he was right, but he was wrong. That's what we want to hear.
Weird, annoying, sucks. All right, finally in the news, this is funny. And Greg, you're way more plugged into this world than Mark or I, so you can perhaps tell us why these things can change so quickly, but I guess it makes sense. So we've been talking about the last few weeks, Brock Purdy, who's having really an excellent season for the Niners, who I think we're all in agreement are the best team in football. And why is he being overlooked in the MVP race when you look at the odds at the sports books? And, he was kind of in the distant background a couple of weeks ago when we first started talking about this. Well, after Purdy threw 4 touchdowns and the Niners blew out the Eagles, that quickly changed to the point now that Purdy is the odds-on favorite to win Super Bowl MVP. In the latest odds, the Niners are also the favorite to win the Super Bowl. Purdy threw for 314 and 4. There are the odds right there. If you're watching on YouTube, Purdy's a plus 300. Dak right behind him at plus 350. I think that checks out. And then it's a little bit of a drop-off after that. Plus 900 for Lamar. Plus 1,600 for Tyreek Hill. There you go,
Hurts
Greg.
at plus 350.
That's your boy.
Hurts
and
at
Josh
plus
Allen plus 3,500.
Hurts at plus 350. Tua at plus 700.
Oh, sorry, I was reading it wrong. My bad.
Too. Yeah, it's confusing how it was set up. Just with the two things. These things change fast though, because they're just a reflection of what Vegas thinks people like us think, which is very nebulous, as you would like to say, especially with 8 weeks left in the season. They're just trying to what is the average Joe thinking, essentially. And the average Joe wasn't thinking Purdy until now. It's still, the field, plus 300 isn't that much of a favorite. It would still say it's way, way, way more likely that Purdy doesn't win than he doesn't, but he has the closest odds. The Dak thing is more interesting to me because I think he was plus 3,000 3 weeks ago. And now he's kind of a co-favorite with Purdy. and Hurts. I still like Tyreek. I still think actually he has a much better chance than those odds indicate.
We may be closer to a season where like a Tyreek Hill or someone like that or a Christian McCaffrey can rise up and not be a quarterback and win this. But like I know we're all like of this world that like quarterback wins. We just ignore them. It's almost better if you win 3 games, but you're a pristine like player. But honestly, like Brock Purdy, I think it matters to voters and like generalists that Brock Purdy blew out the Cowboys in a game that Dak didn't play well in. He blew out the Eagles in a game that Jalen Hurts played all right in, but it wasn't like Jalen Hurts won. And now Dak and Jalen Hurts go play each other next week. And if one of those really suffers in that game, you're starting to see like where's the terrible Brock Purdy game against a giant killer that we see recently. Like he's surging and other guys are starting to knock each other off. I think that affects voting. Like
I think the last 5 weeks,
wins,
I stand by that. Like the last 5 weeks ultimately decide it. Now you got to kind of be in this top 8 probably to start. But the last 5 weeks will be huge. And if it's on QB wins, which it shouldn't be, and yet that will be a huge factor. All these guys are all about the same in terms of their team. So how their teams finish, obviously, is a huge factor.
And I'll say it again, just because it keeps on coming up. But, and this isn't coming at you at all, Greg, but, you know, there's still people have to vote. Mm-hmm. And are we really going to, on NFL Honors Night, going to call up Tyreek Hill, who is someone that has just violence in his past and has hurt people? You know, if Deshaun Watson was having a monster year this year, would we be okay giving him the MVP? Where's the line? Like, where's the separation with these guys and what they've done in their personal life? And when did we decide that they're worthy for the discussion of these on-field awards, and when they should be disqualified or even be vilified as people with no redeeming qualities? Like, where is that line? I'm a little confused.
No redeeming qualities is a pretty strong statement about any person, but I guess I would say we've let him. First of all, he's back into the league for 5-6 years. He's won multiple postseason awards from the exact same 50 voters that are voting on this. So the awards, I think, say you're not supposed to take that into account. Could that come into account ultimately on a big award like MVP? That's a fair point to make. I don't tend to think that's getting priced into those numbers or into voters' thoughts again, but I could be wrong. It's a fair point. I would say, though, the exact same 50 people are voting him first team All-Pro year after year, which you can say isn't as big a deal. It isn't, but it's a big honor. It makes a big difference to him, and they've been voting him for that sort of thing.
And for people that don't know, he had a ugly domestic violence arrest in college, and there was a child abuse investigation while he was with the Chiefs. That was a huge story at the time. So it is a spotty record, to say the least, around Hill. But you know what? If he goes for 2,000 yards and carries that offense to historic places, yeah, from the pure statistical breakdown, he's in that conversation. It's just, you know. Anything else?
That's about it.
All right.
I will save my Tyreek Hill case. You're right. It is a little awkward for later, but I got some good numbers for later. You know,
ooh, good. Okay. Well, that's nice. Let's see. That's our busy Sunday, Monday. Tuesday, we're going to watch some games, recharge our batteries, and get ready for our Wednesday program, and then a Thursday program, and then another Thursday program. You know, the wheel, it keeps spinning. Thank you to everybody for your support. We could not do it without you. And I'm still seeing all those in our mentions, all those people that have been listening to Around the NFL and the podcast. It's a big part of their experience, whether they're in their cars or at home, or maybe there's an earpiece in when the wife or the husband's talking, and you could just shut out the world. Those kids to be
Someone
quiet.
had 84,000. Was that like a real thing? How is that even possible? 84,000 minutes.
It's incredible. So thank you to everybody. The fact that we still have you guys with us 11 years in, we're very lucky.
Why don't hundreds of people have 84,000 minutes? That's my question.
Because do the math. It's like 4 hours a day. How is that? We don't even make close to that amount of content. So it's just,
well, someone made it. Someone showed that it's possible. So, follow that individual's glory.
I like that, Mark. As the great philosopher Paul Hewson once said, ambition bites the nails of success. You just got to keep pushing. Keep pushing. Keep pushing. All right, till next time, thank you, everybody. Heed the call.